Hey, what's up, guys? Today we are talking about the largest city in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, and the 5 pros and cons of living here.
This is the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, the show that highlights Saskatchewan real estate. Looking to buy your first house, your next investment property? Subscribe to never miss an episode. Here's your host, Ron Quaroni.
Welcome back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. I'm your Saskatchewan mortgage professional, Ron Quaroni. Here on the podcast, we love to touch on different aspects of Saskatchewan real estate, whether that be hearing from different professionals in the industry, what's happening in the market, or talking about specific cities. And that's exactly what we're going to do here today, as we have a past guest, Scott Ziegler, joining us back on the call. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, happy to be here. It's a three-peat, so I'm excited to be here.
Just watch out. It'll probably be 4 one of these days, but really happy to have you back on, Scott, because you have an excellent perspective and have done great videos on your channel, pardon me, about Saskatoon. And so we wanted to touch on that, and we're going to go through the 5 pros and 5 cons of the city. So quickly, Scott, if someone hasn't heard your past episodes, just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the interview.
Like you said, I've realtor here in Saskatoon, been licensed since 2006, and have really fallen in love more and more every year with Saskatoon. I think it's an absolute fantastic place to live, to own a home, quality of life. We'll get into all of it today, and a great place to invest. And I've showcased that on my YouTube channel, so that people that are thinking about moving to Saskatoon have the information that they need to make an informed decision. So
awesome. All right, let's get right into the pros, and starting off with one you just mentioned, the quality of life in Saskatoon.
Saskatoon has tremendous quality of life just around, I know we'll get a bit deeper into it, but around affordability, around housing. There's lots of space to grow here, lots of space to, parks, and your neighbors aren't on top of you. We don't have houses built upon houses built upon houses. The cost of food and entertainment, it's just really provides a really great place to live, where it's safe, it's affordable, people have room to grow, and there's lots to do here. And we have a great our city's laid out in such a way that there's something to do in all parts of the city and for everybody. So it's just I think the quality of life in Saskatoon probably could encompass everything that we're going to talk about today.
Totally. And it's probably one of the last cities in the country where 2 people working a full-time job, basically at any price level, can afford to buy a property, whether that's an entry-level condo or moving all the way up into your, 700,000 single-family homes. Very affordable from that place still, when comparing it to a Vancouver or Toronto. Even now, the Maritimes, Saskatchewan is the cheapest place to live. I think I saw a CBC article the other day that
it's not the cheapest, Ron. It's the most affordable.
Thank you, Scott. And let's talk about affordable housing.
Perfect segue into affordable housing. And I think you already answered the question. You can still afford to buy a home here. You can still afford to get an investment property here that will provide cash flow for you. We have, an affordable rental market. So those people that are moving to Saskatoon that might not want to buy a home, rent here is still fairly stable, and it doesn't sort of seem to spike depending on what the residential resale market is doing. So Saskatoon is still a place where you can come and not be house poor and get all the benefits that we talked about in point 1 of the quality of life.
I didn't have breakfast before we did this interview, so this next point is going to make me hungry. We're talking about the great food scene in Saskatoon, and it's so true. I'd love you to expand on this, Scott.
Saskatoon has a great food scene, and it sort of ties into the overall vibe of our city. It's Saskatoon's been described as a festival city. Of course, we have sort of that harsh winter, and I know that we'll get into that, but spring, summer, and fall, there's always a different festival. There's always a different sort of food festival, and food is a big component of our festivals. And not only that, but our downtown is primarily comprised of restaurants. We have lots of Saskatoon's very entrepreneurial as well. So we have lots of non-chain restaurants here, lots of mom and pop shops, lots of ethnic food. So it doesn't matter what your budget, what your taste, you can find something in Saskatoon. And I didn't even touch on the ice cream shops that we have here. So from soup to nuts, ice cream to fine dining, we have it all here and we have it in abundance. And we really seem to come together as a community over food.
Yes, completely agreed. You said it all there, Scott. And moving on to some sightseeing, some tourism, the Meewasin Trail and the River Valley. When you hear of Saskatoon, it kind of evokes images of that downtown Bessborough Hotel and kind of that beautiful riverfront. So expand upon this for us.
I don't have the stat in front of me, but there's something like over 100 kilometers of river trail in Saskatoon along the Meewasin Valley. And so that starts right from the far west. I guess it depends which way you're looking at it, but right from the far west side of our city to the far east side and through to the north end of the city, the Meewasin Trail basically follows the ebbs and flows of the riverbank. It is, I think, what makes Saskatoon. In fact, I think it might be one of the top things that makes Saskatoon so great, makes Saskatoon such a destination for people to come. And to our credit, or to the city's credit, they've used the trail very well. There's parks every couple of kilometers. There's lookouts, there's bridges. You know, of course, many people have heard that Saskatoon's the city of bridges. And so you can do a 2 kilometer, a 5 kilometer, a 10 kilometer, and a 20 kilometer loop, depending on which bridge you decide to cross. And the Meewasin Trail is just, I don't even want to say it's a hidden gem. It's just a true gem of what we have in Saskatoon for outdoor space. And that's not even to, expand on all of the other parks, all of the other green spaces, all of the other sort of sporting fields that we have. Saskatoon is very tree covered. It's got a large tree canopy, and it's just a very sort of great city if you enjoy the outdoors.
And because it's so big, there's always going to be a place that you can find that's quiet, secluded, and right beside the beautiful river. And as you say, all the way along, it's beautifully developed. So always a great way to spend a time with the family on the day. And Saskatoon does have a ton of trees. Moving on to the people of Saskatoon, Scott, our fifth and final point on the things that you love about Saskatoon.
Saskatoon is technically a large city or a large prairie city. Of course, it's not the scale of Vancouver's and Toronto's, but again, speaking specifically of Saskatchewan or the West or the prairies, Saskatoon is a big city, but it still has a small town feel. If you need help, there's an organization or somebody to help you. If you get stuck in the snow in the wintertime, within 60 seconds, you're going to have a group of people pushing and digging you out. If you're walking down the sidewalk and smile at somebody, you're going to get a smile back. And Saskatoon just sort of has still that small town feel. It's not that large. It's still easy to get around. If a friend says last minute, let's meet someplace for coffee or for supper, you can jump in your car or your bike or public transit and get there relatively quickly. So it's a different vibe here. It has all of the amenities of a big city. It has all of the features of a big city, but it doesn't feel like you're lost in a concrete jungle with emotionalist people here. It's a great place to live, and I think the people will trump all of the other things that we talk about, because without a thriving population and a friendly population and an engaged population, all those other things don't really matter.
Awesome. Yep. Human capital is always number one. And now moving on to the things that we're not as fond of when we're talking about Saskatoon. And there's always a pros and cons with this. So starting with the traffic.
So some people that, depending on where you're listening to this episode, are going to chuckle, but the average commute time in Saskatoon technically is 17 minutes, just long enough for you to listen to this podcast on your morning commute. Now, you're going to come from Toronto or Vancouver or Calgary, and you're going to laugh at the statement of traffic. But again, speaking localized here, traffic can be a bit of a hassle. Our infrastructure, again, going back to one of the last points about it being a big city with a small town feel, our infrastructure is still sort of built around that small town feel. So we don't make the best use of, freeways and major, artillery streets without traffic lights and different things like that. So it can be a bit of a pain to get around, but let's be honest, at the 17-minute commute, I think most people are going to be able to manage that.
I think that's the thing that most people complain about when they come from a smaller city in Saskatchewan, a Humboldt, a Melfort, and then they have to drive in Saskatoon, and it's just a nightmare. But yeah, I think relativity is a beautiful thing in this case. That if you're coming from a bigger city in Canada, the traffic here will be, you know, zero to none. And
You can get everywhere in the city in less than 20 minutes. So that's you can almost put that on the pro side.
yeah, all right. I don't think this one will fall on the pro side. This one definitely stays on the con side. Construction season.
Saskatoon has two seasons. We have winter and we have construction season. And again, these are, let's be honest, when we talk about cons and things that we dislike, it really shows you how great the city is when we have to nitpick little things like this. But wouldn't it be great if the city administration could maybe pick different areas of the city to do construction instead of focusing them all around one corner of the city and making it impossible to get anywhere? Yes, I know that complaining about making a mountain out of a molehill, but Saskatoon definitely has a limited amount of time from spring till fall to get their construction done, and the city definitely does their best to fill those months and get as much done as they can.
And even logistically, we can't peg it all on the city. I think the nature of our climate, where you have freeze thaw cycles, you have a lot of salt going on the road, and I think all of these things are detrimental to road. And then when you have a very short season to fix all of these things, then it does kind of pile up into one area.
True.
Moving on to the city, let's touch on property taxes.
Yeah, property taxes in the city, technically speaking, sort of if you look at it as an average or a per capita, property taxes in Saskatoon will be slightly higher than other major cities. Speaking of more like an Edmonton or a Calgary or a Winnipeg, the property taxes here are slightly higher. And I'm not 100% sure why. I could actually go back to the point that we made, just earlier, that because we are still a relatively smaller city, we've grown to the suburbs quite a bit. We haven't quite understood that large cities grow from the inside up instead of moving out. And I think that's really increased our infrastructure, which has then increased the amount of money that the city needs to spend to service that infrastructure. So I think that's a growing pain, but I would not discourage somebody thinking, well, I'm thinking about moving to Saskatoon. The property taxes aren't exponentially higher here. It's just something to be aware of. And when you're budgeting or speaking, with your advisor about whether or not you want to move here, property taxes is something to be aware of.
To take a quick tangent, Scott, I'd love to get your take on urban sprawl. When we're talking about the city of Saskatoon pushing outwards, east and west, and a city that's not necessarily growing up as much as it could be, is that a nature of the geography of places like Calgary and Saskatoon, that there's a lot of flat farmland surrounding it, and so it's fairly easy to just put up another neighborhood? What's your take on that?
I would It's a fair point, but I think that when we talk about what's easy, I think it's easy for the city administration to push out because it doesn't ruffle any feathers. I think that one thing our city administration doesn't like to do is get their nose dirty. They don't like to get people mad. And as soon as you start talking about density, you've heard the term NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. We see a lot of that here. And I've spent a lot of time actually in some of the bigger cities like Calgary and Vancouver. And it's not uncommon in those cities to find a half a block of houses and then all of a sudden have a big high rise condo building, and then on the corner have a commercial building with an ice cream shop and a tattoo parlor in the bottom and a couple of residents above it, and it really seems to flow very well. And I think until we get an administration here that is willing to take the heat for density and diversification, we're not going to see that, even though it's part of the city's strategic plan. We definitely need to begin to densify our city. And we're seeing a lot of that now on Broadway Avenue, lots of newer high-rise buildings going up on Broadway. And mark my words, in 5 or 10 years, that whole area of the city is going to be a fantastic place to live, work, and play because of that.
Totally. Yeah, kind of becoming the new downtown. And just touching on your last point here, Scott, big city, but too small town thinking, that kind of ties into exactly what you're going over here.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
And so would that be more of that because it's a small town or a smaller town feel, Scott, that there is that closeness to neighbors as well? If it was a bigger city, then maybe it's a little easier to say, no, this has to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, just to expand on the last point, I think that Saskatoon just sort of needs to make a decision as to how they want to grow and pursue that. And I do see change coming. Like I mentioned, Broadway is definitely densifying up in that area. And it's just gonna make that area so much more vibrant. And another thing that I think, touching on that can go into the con list is our downtown is there's nothing to speak of. A lot of these big cities, the downtown is a destination. It's not in Saskatoon. It's not that it's necessarily unsafe, while you could get yourself into trouble if, maybe if you tried to. It's not that it's unsafe. It's just it's very blah. It's very bland. There's not, other than the restaurants, which I touched on earlier, there's not really anything else to draw you to downtown. However, as we start to push out to the peripherals of downtown, closer to the River Landing, the Remy Modern Art Gallery, the Persephone Theater, you can see that there's pockets of quote unquote downtown that are starting to thrive. But until they get rid of some of the parking lots and start building some livable infrastructure, grocery stores, things like that, probably not going to see a real revitalization of our downtown.
Awesome point, Scott. Thank you so much for taking us through your kind of 5 pros and 5 cons of Saskatoon. I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of them, and I kind of echo the same sentiment. I just kind of want to end off here, Scott. If we were talking to someone who doesn't live in Saskatchewan necessarily, and they're looking at house prices in Vancouver and Toronto, and they're wondering about the trends of real estate here, can we talk about how Saskatoon might be different from a Saskatoon and Toronto when we're talking about the trend of real estate?
Yeah. So, going back to the introduction, being that my YouTube channel focuses on mostly Saskatoon, I get calls and emails almost daily about people inquiring what would it might look like to live in Saskatoon. And one thing that I can tell people is that, going back to the very first point about quality of life, that encompasses, a lot of factors. And one of that is affordability in our real estate market. I mean, if you happen to own a property in Toronto or Vancouver, whatever that property is, whatever you sell it for, is going to buy you almost anything you want in Saskatoon. And then the next question that comes up is the market for employment. And Saskatoon has very good employment. Our statistics show that the average salary in Saskatoon is 70,000. And even if you have sort of a higher income job in a big city and take a slight pay cut to come to Saskatoon, your cost of living is a fraction of what it would be when you compare house prices. And then even if we break that down a little bit further into housing prices, the one thing, and it's kind of a pro and a con in itself with Saskatoon house prices, is that we don't see massive swings in our housing market. Throughout the pandemic and the last couple of years, we've seen an appreciation of 15, 16, 17, 18%, or say a Toronto in some neighborhoods has seen 80 or 90%. Well, right now, those same neighborhoods in Toronto were down 30 or 40%, where our market is starting to plateau at the best case scenario, and worst case, we might be down 1 or 2% this year. So when you move to Saskatoon, you can rest assured that you're not going to get caught in some sort of large swing that will leave you holding the bag, as they say, with a downturn in the real estate market. And that also, if I can take it one step further, going back to the employment market, because our employment here is very entrepreneurial. Yes, it's still heavy agriculture. We do have natural resources here, but we also have a very big tech sector, lots of a medical sector, lots of universities, and then lots of entrepreneurs we are fairly sheltered from big swings in employment as well, because when one sector maybe is feeling a pinch, another sector seems to be making up that slack. So moving to Saskatoon will give you a great place to live. It will give you affordable housing, and it'll give you an opportunity to make a great living surrounded by great people. So I don't know what else you could ask for in Canada moving here.
I think that's great. And I'd love to just quickly add on to that I was listening to the radio the other day, and I think it was Paul Martin who was saying that in the last big recession, 2008, there was one part of North America that actually did quite well, and it was Saskatchewan. And a big part of that is because we are an exporter of stuff, whether that be grain, uranium, oil, human capital. We are good at sending things to the rest of the world. And during a time of low economic activity, that's what you want in a people who are consuming less and pushing out more. And so it kind of gives us that robust economy to help us go through different times. So Scott, I really want to thank you for your time, your expertise on Saskatoon. You do have a wonderful YouTube channel. Can you just share a little bit about the folks who are listening right now, where they can find you, how can they connect with you?
If they just Google me, Scott Ziegler, Saskatoon, Scott Ziegler Real Estate, you will find all my channels, from my Instagram to my YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. I always tell people, wherever it's most convenient for you to connect with me, I'm happy to meet you there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for the invite, Ron.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode. If you are looking for more information on Saskatchewan, particularly Saskatoon, we have lots of great videos on the channel, so please check out the playlist to see if there's something right here for you. If you did enjoy this episode and found it informative, do me a favor, help grow the channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. Until next week, I'm Ron Quaroni, your Saskatchewan mortgage professional. Bye for now.